Okay, let the sound get going. Big Dill versus HiJinx. Hello, welcome back. Welcome to the Owl Nest. If you're new here, my name is Jen. I am the team captain for Offbeat Robotics, where we bring you the HiJinx. On today's post-fight video, we're going to talk about What the Heck Was That, starring our friends Big Dill. Where do I even start? Okay, first off, we weren't even supposed to fight Big Dill. Spoiler alert. Okay, if you haven't seen Big Dill versus HiJinx, turn this off right now. Go catch it. It's on Discovery, Discovery Plus, on Amazon. It's on like a bunch of streaming services. Try not to bootleg it though. We need the ratings. Gotta make good TV. Anyway, before we get into the fight itself, I need to talk about all the things that went wrong leading up to the fight because it's just very funny in that tragic comic sort of way. Also, I am not time-stamping the engineering portions of this video because I feel like talking today, so strap in because you have questions and I have the answers. Questions such as, what is up with that snazzy new armor? Which weapon bar was actually installed during this fight? And why did the BattleBots' handsome talent say that we had to change our configuration right before the fight? All this and more. Let's start with the armor. I'd like to give a shout out to our old friend Sawblaze for helping us identify an unexpected failure mode for the top armor panels back in the World Championship in 2021. Now, we knew from day one that wide flat armor panels would be vulnerable to top attack robots, but at the end of 2019, when legendary driver Orion Beach and I sat down to kick off this build, there were really only two top attack spinning robots in the field that you really had to worry about, and that was Scorpios, who can take out a tombstone, and Sawblaze, who can take out anyone, I guess? There were hammerbots, of course, but we had a notion about how to handle a hammerbot, such as the armor sandwich that we used against Chomp. This is the only sandwich I will make for you. The basic premise of the armor sandwich is we use a very hard armor on top, usually AR steel. The delicious middle in 2020 was made of sorbothane. Now I have a new material that you might see later in the season if you stay tuned. And then the bottom layer can really be anything that is very stiff and very light. So for 2020, we had aluminum panels on the bottom to hold the guts in, and for 2022, we were able to acquire titanium. In 2020, we had no titanium on the robot at all. We'll have to do a separate video on titanium alloy, so anyway. Long story long, we felt like we had hammerbots on lock, and the odds of us fighting a top attack robot in 2020 were like 1 in 40, so it was substantially more likely that we were going to fight a vertical spinner. And since that is also the premium meta right now, it made sense to design a robot to fight vertical spinners and then have modules that we could use against control bots or other high KE robots. These days, however, we have Switchback, Blacksmith, Kraken, Huge Can Spin Down, and Big Dill. Like, many more teams have a chance to do to us what Sawblaze did. And what that is when a top attack spinning robot comes down on our armor, there's not just like a piercing action, there's also a raking action. As the weapon is spinning into the armor and catches, it's also pulling the armor towards them. That puts our hardware in shear. That shear force can snap our hardware and take the whole armor panel off. Suboptimal, as we say in engineering. So how do we deal with that without fundamentally changing the shape of the robot? The strategy is simple. We need to slow down our opponent's weapon or stop the weapon from spinning if we can. There are many ways to approach this problem, some you've seen on BattleBots over the years. For example, you've probably heard the term ablative armor applied to a variety of plastics used in robot combat, such as UHMW, Delrin, or even composites such as Tegris. The Oxford Online Dictionary defines ablation as the surgical removal of body tissue.
And the same spot, just surgical.
I'm not sure this joke is appealing. Not sure if it counts as a joke at all. Moving on, ablative armor is armor which prevents damage to a critical system through the process of ablation, or the removal of material from the surface of the object. So in combat, this is a sacrificial material on the outside of the robot that can be hit, broken off, chipped away, while the important stuff inside is safe. So Shatter, for example, uses elaborately machined pieces of UHMW on their robot to absorb the energy from the hits from spinners. The first hit will have the most energy stored, and in the impact, that energy is transferred into the UHMW, which deforms and breaks away. The subsequent hits have less and less energy until the spinner backs off and spins up to full again. This slowing down of the opponent's weapon buys Shatter the time they need to make their own attack, and it protects the internals on their robot. So by way of analogy, if you've ever used your hands to stop a fan, and don't, if you haven't already done this, don't risk your hand to try this experiment, just maybe take my word for it this time. I am not responsible for your hands. If you have done this, used your hand to stop a low-speed plastic fan, for example, you'd notice that the first hit from the fan was the hardest, and the second was slower and had less energy, hit less hard. Does that make sense? Girl bosses are supposed to stop saying, "Does that make sense?" in 2023. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, Orion and I both spooled up a few top armor options for this new field of angry green top attack monsters. Okay, they're not all green, but Kraken is clearly trying to come back for another bite. So I had modeled up some terrain map-esque variations of machined UHMW Integris, and I reached out to a few manufacturers to see if anyone would like to sponsor us, but no joy on that one. Without sponsorship, those materials were prohibitively expensive for us to acquire and machine. But we did gain a new sponsor in 2022, and that is SendCutSend. SendCutSend does a massive variety of laser cut materials, including copper bars, which we needed for our custom electronics, and titanium, which we needed for the upgraded drive hardware. Orion came up with an idea that utilized SendCutSend's material library, in particular the 1/8 inch AR500 plate. It's time for a side quest. If you have ever wanted to build an ant weight or beetle weight robot, you've probably heard of Fingertech Robotics. This is a fantastic site for bot kits and some really rad little weapon bars. And now I am pleased to announce Fingertech Robotics will be carrying a tiny version of the iconic HiJinx Long Bar. It's so cute! This is actually AR500 steel, laser cut, and ready to put on your tiny robot. I'm going to put a link below in the doodle, and you can buy this right now and put it on your ant weight, and Anyway, now I have put gloves on. And I mention this because SendCutSend makes laser cut materials accessible to home builders and to us. They are incredibly good and affordable. The armor panel that I'm holding in my hand is made of the same material as our tiny HiJinx bar, although as you'll see in a moment, we're using them in fundamentally different ways here. Let me explain. This is the armor panel that we actually used in the fight with Big Dill. And someone had commented online asking if we had a color-changing paint. Nope, this is our regular Montana cans, thank you, paint, but we've done an optical illusion with the ribs so that when we move around the arena, it appears to change color. I thought that was really clever. And this armor is ribbed. I will let you make the jokes. So the base piece of this armor has the same hardware locations as our 3/16 AR400 armor and the anodized aluminum, but of course it is thinner than our normal steel armor, and the weight that we saved by using an 1/8 inch seal is sunk into these vertical ribs. The ribs are not seam or stitch welded, they are plug welded from the bottom. You can't even see the welds because we're so good. In order to get the ribs and the base plate perfectly aligned, I designed a welding fixture. Let's go to the CAD. HiJinx is proudly sponsored by Autodesk. This fixture allows me to clamp the base panel and all of the ribs at the correct angle and in their correct locations for welding. These constraints prevent warping, which can be a huge problem when you're welding materials that are this thin. In combat, the ribs function the same way as your fingers on a fan blade. And again, don't put your fingers in like a metal fan. I'm not responsible for your hands, okay? Just be smart. So these ribs have the same function as an ablative piece of UHMW. These ribs bend, deform, and even break off, all to slow down the opponent's weapon and prevent the base plate and the electronics that it protects from taking a direct hit. Now, you're very clever, so you're probably wondering, why did you use this armor? Big Dill had a lifter arm installed. That's a poor use case for ribbed armor. You are so right. First of all, we weren't even supposed to fight Big Dill. We were actually slated to fight a robot called Doom. We spent a lot of time in our first few days helping Doom to get ready, but unfortunately, they were simply too far behind schedule to make it through safety. And listen, building a heavyweight robot is incredibly difficult, and it just did not come together for them. So, their first fight went to Big Dill. Honestly, I love this team. Like, the whole team is lovely, but especially Emmanuel, he is a pillar of the robot community. Ellis is like boy wonder with the sheer volume of builds. And with Russ, well, frankly, Russ made the original Dark Slayer. That was the tiny proof of concept for a robot like HiJinx. He inspired us. and I had a great feeling about this fight. Win or lose, Emmanuel and Orion are both good drivers. Like, this was gonna be a good show. Bonus! I had personally gone to our sponsor, Van Bebber Brothers in Petaluma, California, to pick up Big Dill's new custom-bent thick AR plows and brought them with me to the event. I am sometimes the architect of my own catastrophes. So, in theory, both robots should have been in good shape. Big Dill ran the Van Bebber plow in their fight against us. But even before that happened, many things had begun to go wrong. Let's talk about them. First, Big Dill had planned to run their top attack configuration, which for us meant keeping the ribbed armor on since they would have a chance to wreck shop from above if we ran the flat panels. Because we had brand new welded armor that hadn't been weighed yet, when we got on the scale, we found out we were 1 pound overweight. Oh, I'm having Saw Blades flashbacks already. Why you gotta be green, Big Dill? But luckily this time we were prepared. Now we could just take off the face and the hubcaps, scrawl the name HiJinx on top of the Sharpie, and technically we would meet our contractual obligations, but we had another option. A second extra stout bar that, due to a manufacturing issue, wound up several pounds lighter than the OG extra stout bar. Our wonderful sponsor, Integrated Motion Systems in Roseville, California, made the original extra stout bar in 2021, and that machining process turned out to be more difficult than even we had anticipated. For 2022, we were hoping to have 2 more extra stout bars that were closer to spec, but things had gone really wrong for our friends in Roseville. And I'm not going to get into personal details, but on top of difficult times at home, there were heat waves in Sacramento that knocked out power while our guy Michael was trying to set up and run not only the extra stout bars, but also his regular paid work. IMS gifts us this machining time, and it's up to 100 hours per weapon bar. So very rapidly we went from, oh, we've got plenty of time, to, oh, we have no time. Go, now. At about 60 hours into the 100-hour machining process, something went wrong. Our friend took a break, while the machine seemed to be chugging along just fine. But what happened next is that the vibration in the tool holder was so substantial, the tool backed out and gouged into the chamfer all the way around. So when it happened, he shut the machine down, took a look at it, took a picture, and sent it to me and explained what had happened. And this is not good news. We had a chat about it and decided that since there simply was no time to do a second setup for another weapon bar, what we would do, our pro gamer move, would be to incorporate that gouge into a modified design for an extra stout bar that we are currently calling the Foo Bar. Improvise, adapt, hope for the best. So I drove to Sacramento the day we were loading out from the shop for BattleBots and picked up this guy. But that meant I had no time to correct the stress riser where the gouge had bottomed out on the bottom of the chamfer. That stress concentration point right here. I also did not have time to add our extra hard teeth. That's my weapon bar special sauce. So this weapon bar was as raw as a weapon bar could be, but it existed. Flash forward to us putting HiJinx on the scale a few days later, and we need to lose a pound. All right, well, first things first, E-Man's pretty cool, so I decided to just walk over to Big Dill's pit and tell them what the situation was and ask if we could have some decoration weight. And, maybe they would want to run decoration too. I mean, I don't mind fighting a steel chair. And I just tell them the truth. We're 1 pound overweight. I could pull that weight out of the hubcaps and the face and the nameplate, but I'm not going to. If we have to pull a pound out, I'm going to swap the extra stout bar for the Foo Bar, because they're very similar, but the Foo Bar is pounds lighter. That's my plan. And I warned them, the Foo Bar and the extra stout bar are basically identical, but the Foo Bar is lighter and will spin up faster. So Emmanuel thinks it over and he says, I'll give you a pound of decoration weight if you give me weight enough to run a mini-bot. Bet. Yes, I want this. I want you to run the mini-bot. Is the mini-bot height appropriate to reach the bottom of HiJinx where we keep our juicy electronics bolted to the bottom? Are we going to shatter that thing across the arena in spectacular fashion? I don't know, but I want to see it. Yes, you give me a pound of decoration weight, I will give you all of the decoration weight for that mini-bot. Absolutely. So I run back over to the battery tent and I tell the team the good news, which was very short-lived. Oh, after I got back to the battery tent, I see Emmanuel and Ellis and Russ walking towards me, and they want to see the weapon bars. So, yeah, sure, I show them both of the weapon bars. And I believe it was Ellis who said, no, you make them change the weapon bars. Well, crap. And I say, okay, but then you're not going to have weight to run your mini-bot. Are you sure this is what you want? And they say, yes. Switch your weapon bars. And it was in that moment that we all jumped on the struggle bus. You see, what had happened was, the foobar had been pushed out of the shop so rapidly that we didn't have time to check the fit for the lobes on the bottom of the weapon shaft, where it's captured by the giganut. And it should have been fine, but it wasn't. There was interference between the foobar and the bottom of the weapon shaft. It would not slide on. We tried to hammer it on and the sound producers were like, get out. So picture this. We're in the parking lot with 2 hammers and a die grinder trying to skin off a few mil of AR-500 from the inside of the weapon bar so that we can just get it on the robot. I'm dying. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to us, Big Dill had gone into the test box and they had blown up the gearbox on their top attack configuration. So suddenly their day was going much worse than ours, only we didn't know that. If we had known, I would have stopped right then, swapped the extra stout bar back on, and taken off the heavy top armor and put on flat panels, and it would have been fine. But we just didn't know. So finally, we get ourselves in the test box, and our motor controllers have suddenly forgotten what their purpose in life is. It's fine. Everything is fine. We get it running. We are functional. We are buttoned up. We are weighed and we are ready to go. And I'm in the battery tent and I look over at Big Dill. Excuse me, why is there a grabby bot where my top attack robot is supposed to be? Well, that's when I found out about the gearbox. And honestly, we had all had such a rough day at that point. I was just sweaty and toast. Dead toast. So we're rolling out to the arena and I just turned over to Big Dill and I said, look, winner buys beer. Long story short, I did buy them beer. Now, to the fight. This video is going to be a year long. We went into this fight with only one of the 2 weapon motors engaging the gear drive. I'm going to leave that story for the next video. This is what writers call foreshadowing. But I want to point out that our higher spin-up time is a direct result of running with 1/2 of the system excluded from the gear drive. And we made that call because there was a chance that the 2 motor controllers were going to fight each other. And that is a much worse outcome for us than a slow spin-up time. Improvise. In the fight itself, there were some key beautiful moments for us. It has to be said that HiJinx rolling upside down is way more dangerous to grabby robots because it puts our weapon bar at their weapon arm height instead of their plow height. This is just a true fact. This matters because skipping up off of a plow into the lifter could slow our weapon down, but when we're upside down, it's a direct hit from our weapon onto their arm. And to demonstrate what that kind of force looks like, I want to thank Big Dill for giving me this piece of their lifter arm after the fight. You guys are really great. But I just want to... Yo, dog! I heard you like bends. This is supposed to be straight, and instead it's got a twist and a bend. This is 1/2-inch AR-500. This is not easy to bend. Our sponsor, Bebber in Petaluma, California, is one of the few places in the country that will bend this for you, or we will do it for you with much less precision. Thank you, Big Dill. I really appreciate this. I believe that is the last pivotal hit that happened while we were inverted, and both robots went full force. I think once the lifter arm had been disabled, that may have been part of what instigated the fire inside of the robot. Motor controllers that are pulling amps while the motor is stalled out can catch fire that way. My favorite moment of this fight was just after we saw that Big Dill had sort of stalled out and there was an opportunity to self-right. HiJinx can drive upside down. The tail is also designed to be a self-righter, but you have to have the time and the space to move yourself to a wall to use it, and this was a perfect opportunity. So Orion saw that Big Dill wasn't moving, seized the moment, and turned ourselves over. And as if on cue, we can hear Kenny Florian say on the tape, HiJinx needs to self-right. Boop! There we go. It's just that easy. Well, it's easy to do what you want when you don't have someone strangling you with a giant, beefy arm. And I'll be honest with you, once the count-out began, I could finally feel myself breathing. So I have to say again, huge shout out and thank you to Big Dill. I am so happy that Big Dill decided to come to the event this year, even though their place in the season wasn't guaranteed. I really hope that the BattleBots selection committee sees the effort they put in, the fact that they were able to step up on 1 day's notice and fight a big horizontal spinner. It says a lot, and I really hope that Big Dill gets to be a regular. They've definitely earned it. And shout out, of course, to our sponsors. Autodesk provides all of our software for computer-aided design, and they also provide us with manufacturing resources. Bebber Brothers Steel provides us and many other teams with steel and forming services you cannot find anywhere else. P3D Creations and Integrated Motion Systems work incredibly hard on our bespoke robot parts. SendCutSend has the fastest turnaround for our laser cut components. Gensace supplied our batteries. Montana Cans makes us look so good. And for this season, we also had an anonymous benefactor who made some larger purchases possible. That is both an inside joke for the team and also a true thing that really happened. Like, we actually had an anonymous benefactor. Thank you so much! Thank you so much! Also, hang on a sec. Also, check out the HiJinx shop. It's at offbeatrobotics.com/merch. And we have at this point moved almost all of our stuff over to Etsy because of logistic reasons, but we do have the team shirts for this year up there, and hoodies and the poker chips. And as the season goes on, we'll put more stuff up there as well. If you have a special request, just let me know, and I will do my best. Do a little dance. Okay.